Thank you. You can hear me okay? Great. And you want me not to bounce around, I imagine, for the camera. Is that true?
I cover pretty wide range. It's okay.
Okay, good. So we're going to talk about things I've been thinking about for the last 5 or 6 years. I started thinking about this at Ancestry and blocked out a plan to implement it, but we never got actually to it. A couple of years ago at minted.com, I was brought in to create the BI environment and implemented part of what we're going to talk about today there. And more recently at lynda.com is my most recent incarnation of this work. So the big idea here is we want to enable real folks and businesses to self-serve their own insights based on data. And I take kind of a unique approach that, a tool vendor will say, go buy tool X and we'll integrate all your data in there, and then business folks can use it like crazy. That's fine for the tool vendor, but for real people, the important thing in any case is they have the data structures correct. And then if you have the data structures correct, on top of that, you can apply whatever tool you want to. So we're going to talk about customers. This presentation is done in Prezi. So you'll see around the edges some frames that we'll get to eventually. But just an overview, we're going to talk about customers, we're going to talk about data, we're going to talk about data analysts and their buddies, the business analysts, and then talk about my proposal and implementations for really simple data structures, and then finally give some examples. So customers, what do I mean by customers? Customers are anybody who pays you money, should pay you money, has given you money, so including prospects. So a very broad definition of customer. And regardless of the nature of your organization. So it can be a product sale, subscription sale, and Minted was an example of product sales. Subscription sales would be lynda.com, Ancestry, and so on, charity, whatever. Customer-focused organizations is a new hot thing. In my second startup back in '83, my mentor told me, Jim, take care of your customers and I'll take care of you. And that has stayed with me for a long time. Other folks have said similar things. Jeff is thinking about customers as guests at Amazon, and you should treat them as guests. I like Bruce Ernst's comments better. He's saying, don't get sucked into thinking about your details, whatever your task at hand is, your website, your Facebook page, your mobile app, your email, whatever. Always keep in mind the customer is the central thing, and all these other methodologies are just tools to get to them. So we want to figure out how to talk to customers, and this is a very trite phrase that whenever you get a pitch from a tool vendor, they're going to say, well, we want you to get the right message out to the right person at the right time, and so on and so on. This all goes back to a paper by Peppers, Roger Dorff, and HBR, Harvard Business Review in '99, talking about one-to-one marketing and really starting that whole concept. It boils down to journalism 101. I was fortunate enough to have journalism 1 in high school, and I don't know if you get that anymore. And what you learn there is the 5 W's and their friend the how. And so what we need to do is we need to cast our understanding of customers so we can answer these questions, so we can communicate with them in a meaningful way, so they will eventually reward us. Most of the W's and the how are pretty straightforward. One exception, and that's the why. And the why is all about motivation. If we can understand motivation, then we can really communicate with the customer. And I have only one way to do that, and that's to hire an expert I'm still looking for it. What we're stuck with is data. All kinds of data from various sources, and I'll do a deep dive on this now. So a lot of our data comes from operational systems, order processing, fulfillment systems, website or sites, CRM systems, call centers, email systems. My favorite that runs many businesses, the frontline desktops of the employees who are talking to customers, dealing with customers, and have their Excel sheets or whatever that does a lot of the business, and then whatever else you can find. Operational systems have a number of issues. One big issue for us trying to understand customers is they're problem focused. So they're focused on solving fulfillment or whatever. So a little aside here, this is a true story. I was standing in line a couple years ago at a famous San Francisco bakery when the person in front of me said, or asked, how do you sell bread? And the overqualified recent MBA clerk answered this. So you tell me what you want, I give you the bread, I tell you what it costs, and you give me the money. Very simple. You know, the 4 basic rules of commerce. Take an order, ship it, invoice, get paid, and be happy. If you build a system to do this, automate this, the system is going to focus on these issues, not on why is the customer there in the first place? What is their preferences in bread, and all the backstories that we need to understand. As you all probably know, operational systems can be really complex. They're designed for optimum performance, and hopefully that means third normal form. In these kind of complex table structures, there's multiple ways to do joins, and if you're not doing it the way the designer intended, you're going to get some interesting answers that are not right. Somebody sat down and designed this system, and there's a lot of interesting columns in it, and unfortunately they're not all used as the designer intended them to be used, or they're overloaded. In other words, they're used for multiple purposes based on the context. And their use changes over time as the organization changes and the underlying system doesn't change. They need to get shoehorned in. And my favorite thing is there may be customer-focused columns in there, like this is a quote from a former customer. Of course we have the person's job title. It's right there, you know? And then I looked at it, and well, half of it's empty, and then half of it's preformed text and garbage and basically worthless. So because of an operational system is focused on doing the operations, even though there might be some customer background data in there, you have to be really careful about believing it. The other big issue is operational systems create a lot of noise. Just in doing their work, they've got to deal with the details of the transaction, which are not relevant for the customer. For example, if I subscribe to lynda.com, I make my mind, I'm going to subscribe, and I start my subscription, and then sometime later, I stop it. So I have 2 decisions. But the subscription processing system is going to deal with all this stuff that happens, right? Credit card issues, products changing, other things that in the real world that the billing system and the subscription processing system is going to deal with. So what we want to do is we want to try to simplify the data we're getting from the operational system into what the subscriber is actually doing. Another class of data is direct responses by the customer. So stated preferences. I like this. I want to know more about this kind of thing. Email systems have preference centers that hopefully guide email content. Search requests on your site or in the store that could be recorded. Mindful clicks as opposed to non-mindful clicks. Caroline was talking about this morning. Surveys, Net Promoter Score, satisfaction survey after you sent them something, brand awareness surveys, and then social media comments that are related to your world. One thing to remember that Alan reminded me of yesterday is make sure the user ID is in here. I've been burned multiple times. I've given a data set that has this great potential, but it's not tied down to individuals. And so this is a constant harangue that I do. Another source for data on customers is analytic results. So feedback from you guys, the modelers, cluster analysis, customer segments, scores, recommendations, in real time, whatever that means for the customer's time scale. So it depends what you're selling. If you're selling houses, you've got a pretty long time scale. If you're selling shoes and books and milk, it's a little bit shorter. If you're selling day trader stock, it's pretty short. And then there's data appends, some third-party data. So neighborhood demographics, US Census properties, at the zip file level or the census block group level, PRISM stuff from Claritas, and then individual demographic and psychographic matchback data from somebody like Axie. And then there's also pooled industry data. So there's a lot of additional things we can pull in to try to get a read on the customer. These guys, who don't look like really happy campers, have to deal with all this data and keep it sorted out. They may have to maintain the systems. They're probably the frontline folks when there are questions asked about simple business questions. They're typically living in IT or data services or finance or ops. They are hopefully Power SQL gurus. Anybody know who Joe Selko is? Okay, Google him. He's been talking about how to do SQL for 30 years. System-focused people, they have some understanding of the domains, but they're primarily focused on the data sources and the data they're in. They may have some data architecture skills. They are QA and QC focused, thank goodness. And they have an engineering mindset. So they do source code control, and they have pretty solid documentation and agile cycles and all that good stuff. Unfortunately, they have an overwhelming work queue, and they're stretched out beyond belief. So when somebody else, toolkit, we assume that they have really powerful SQL stuff, data exploration tools, ETL tools, a couple of different DBMS platforms, MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, whatever, data munging tools, perhaps Python or my favorite R. And then these are the other guys, they're alter egos. So these are business analysts, they're happy for some reason, I'm not sure why. They get to talk to customers, they get to talk to management people, they are embedded in, first of all, they're quants, and they're embedded in typically in departments. They're very result focused, they're domain experts. They may not be titled analysts. They might be head of retention marketing in the marketing group, but they're a quant at heart. They're under time pressure to make decisions. The decision doesn't wait for the queue to come up. It has to be made within a certain time scale. And hopefully we can get some data in there to help them do it. And they might be what I call applied data scientists. So they understand the domain certainly, and they maybe have some modeling tools that they can use. Their toolkits are Excel, PowerPoint. Maybe they have some data exploration visualization tools like Tableau, Click, something similar to that. They probably have many tools they have access to, but they certainly have their personal favorites, and we shouldn't punish them by forcing them to use what is not their personal favorite. And they should be comfortable with simple SQL. And they maybe even have a copy of R in RStudio. At a minimum, they have IT support to actually connect to external data sources. This is, as we all know, probably the hardest part of data analysis is getting the connection in the first place. So what I want to talk about now is my proposal for structuring data so it's really friendly to the data analyst and the the business analyst. And the business analysts don't have to bug the data analyst to get answers. They can go directly into a really simplified data structure. And here's the answers, like customers, orders, and consumptions, 3 levels of detail. Let me talk about the design principles that I use for this. First of all and foremost, it has to be analyst ready, which means the analyst has got to be comfortable working in that space. It's got to be really, really easy, both technically in terms of connecting and structurally in terms of understanding. It should be self-documenting as much as possible. The column names should be business column names, not data table column names. There should be some backup for subtle issues. It should be complete. So if somebody is going to ask a question about customers, they should expect to get maybe 90% of their questions answered at that level. Accurate, it goes without saying, but it's really hard. Timely, so whatever the time scale is. My clients typically update overnight, and that's works well. And it should be really, really fast, responsive to queries. And lastly, it needs to be agile and evolve, have the capability to evolve as your business and your organization. And as we all know in BI, once you see an answer, you end up with 3 more questions, right? So the data structure should be easy to expand. 3 levels of abstraction. So on each level of abstraction, the goal is to know everything there is to know about that level of abstraction. That's the goal. That's not what we're going to deliver initially. And it's going to expand as we use the system and as our needs evolve. So as I said, we have customers, orders, and consumption. And depending on your nature of your business, you're going to want to change these words appropriately. So if you have a subscription business, your customer is a subscriber, your order is the subscription itself, and the consumption is the usage of whatever somebody subscribed to. And you probably also want to plug in the exact word. So is it visiting or watching or applying the SAS tool or reading stuff, whatever that is. Contrast that with the product business, where we have customers, called customers, orders, and then order detail. And order detail should include all the fine structure of the order made by the customer. So at Minted is the company that prints designs on paper and fabric, your holiday cards, your wedding invitations, your birth announcements, all that stuff. And the card ordering process was extremely complex. You had different choices of the number of photos, the number of sides of the paper, the number of the quality of the paper, add-ons, the type of the envelope, if you wanted address stickers, all this other stuff. And the merchants at Minted needed to know the details of all this so they could plan and roll up their process and their marketing to the customers. And finally, we want to model customer decisions. So I hinted at this a little bit in talking about the subscriptions. We want to focus on CIA, which are customer-initiated actions. So we want to extract out of all the noise in the operational system what the customer actually did, and then either ignore or aggregate the stuff in between. And we talked about the subscription example, and my counter example of a lot of noise is the Apache logs and trying to find customer-initiated actions in the Apache website logs. some implementation considerations. And this guides us to what products we actually use to implement things. So all three tables will be really, really wide. All we know about something or other is a lot of stuff, hopefully. So we need to be able to deal with very wide tables. There's a lot of sessionization required in rolling up the detailed data. And so you're going to need a system with really good SQL windowing functions or the equivalent thereof. As we add to the all we know, we need to be able to easily add columns into the tables. It should have a pretty fast load and transform performance. And you do it incrementally, but you still have a lot of stuff happening each day that you need to push through the pipeline. But doesn't have to be blindingly fast. It has to have a way to connect to front ends for our business analysts to use this stuff. That's the JDBC or ODSC connections. And it should be really super, super fast responsive to queries that the business analysts or the front-end tools are creating against this data set. And then finally, I'm going to ignore this for the rest of the talk, but the best practice columns when you build data tables, there's things like you want to put in there surrogate keys and initial load and update information. So here are two parallel examples of the subscription model and the product model. And it's basically, I don't have column names in here, but I have a shopping list of the types of attributes. And I'll dig into this a little bit, but not a whole lot. So starting at the bottom, on a subscription, we need to put together what I call a usage stint. A stint is one visit. So if you belong to 24 Hour Fitness, you go to the gym, you do stuff and you leave, that's one stint. If you come to lynda.com to learn about SQL, for example, you sit down on your computer, you start watching videos, and after a while you leave, so that would be one stint. So the stint is basically the decision process of the customer, subscriber, saying, I want to start using this stuff, whatever it is, up until the point where they stop. The details here is really dependent on the nature of your business and what your product offering is. So, what was used? Well, first of all, we want to know the timestamps that start at the end of the stint. We want to know the intervals. We want to know a gap to the prior and next stints. So it's really interesting to know if somebody's coming back every night or if they're cycling further or longer, when the gaps get longer or not. The location, the platform, are they on mobile, are they on their desktop, are they going back and forth between? Anything else, I mean, there's a lot of details that are really specific to your organization. Up above that is a chain subscription. So the chain subscription is the idea of putting however your operational system keeps track of things together into the point of somebody asking for a subscription and then stopping it or changing it. It has a subscription active flag. It has the product, if there's like a subscription type of this chain, the prior chain, and the next chain, if there is a next chain. Starting and ending dates, intervals, the days to the prior and next, payments, number of payments, dollars are also nice to know. The initial conditions, so you want to know what got somebody into the beginning of this subscription chain. And then the cancel reasons, if somebody is canceled at that point. If it's a voluntary or involuntary cancel. And then you want to roll up that consumption data into a summary that talks about during this chain subscription, folks were primarily doing this kind of consumption. They started out in this area, maybe they ended up in some different area. You want to look at acceleration over the period of the chain. Acceleration meaning usage going up or down, and other stuff. And then finally at the top level is a subscriber. And I like to put in here, I don't want to put in here personal identifiable information for obvious reasons, because this is probably going to be an pretty open data source. But I like to put in the first name, which kind of ties it back, because a new business analyst gets hired on, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to put in their own subscriber ID. And they want to make sure it's their stuff and it's really reassuring to see their name. And when I'm checking on if things are working right, I want to see my name. Excuse me. Is the subscriber currently subscribed or not? Building flag. The initial and last subscription dates and the products they're in, counts of stuff, values, revenue to dates, and revenue to dates windowed over the first year or year and a half or 2 years. Recency. Recency is a really good predictive variable in many models. So it's the end of the last chain end date. The interval, which is the time between when somebody started and today. And then the coverage, which is the number of days they're subscribed out of that interval, and the percentage. So if I started a subscription at Linda a year ago and I'm still a subscriber, I've got 1 year worth of tenure and I've got 100% coverage. But if I left after a month and then came back for another month, someplace in between, I'd have 1/6, whatever that is. The acquisition details. So how do we get this customer? So the marketing folks, the acquisition marketing folks, they need to know why this person came in. What was the motive? Hopefully what's the motivation, but at least the mechanics of it. The channel, the offer, and so on. Consumption profiles, initial consumption, most recent consumption, breadth of consumption. The general engagement levels, so other ways that a subscriber can engage with you, by site activity, by responsiveness to emails, by talking at the call center, that kind of thing. Appended demographics, cohort flags are really useful. So if I want to look at things happening year by year, quarter by quarter, month by month, it's nice to have those available. All these things, these kind of things can be calculated, right? But we want to make it really, really easy on the subscriber level, on the business analyst. And then the segments and scores that we plug in there, and alternate subscriber IDs. Unfortunately, not all systems use the same personal identifier, so it's convenient to have other things here. So we can type that. On the other side, I'm going to gloss over a little bit, but the product table, the order line detail is the SKU and then everything there is to know about the SKU. And you want to have an aggregate roll-up of the type of product it is. So, you know, when I buy this marvelous pencil from Amazon, it has a SKU, but it's also a pencil. It's also a mechanical drawing pencil. So the merchants at Amazon will want to know that kind of stuff. The attributes and the options, all that. Order summary is basically what you put in your shopping cart and emptied. It's nice to have geolocation based on the order itself, especially shipping, so you can look at gifting type of phenomenon. And if there's a follow-up satisfaction survey, plug that in. If there's discounts, refunds, plug those things in. And the customer level stuff is basically the same, but tuned more toward the product. So let's look at some actual examples using the subscription business. So the first question that anybody's going to ask when you bring this data set up is, how many subscribers do we have? And you can write a query to do that, and it's really, really simple. Basically, we're counting the number of rows in the subscriber summary table. That's the top level of abstraction where the subscribe flag is true. The reason this is trivial is that when we designed this and we dug into what it meant to be subscribed, we worked through all the different business rules. So what does it mean for a subscriber to be subscribed? What does it mean if a credit card bounced yesterday? Are they still subscribed? What does it mean if a credit card bounced 3 days ago and we sent them 3 reminder emails and a couple of retries? Are they still subscribed? So there's a whole bunch of complex business rules that your organization has developed that define when somebody's subscribed or not. And we build those into the data so that flag is acting correctly. This is a little bit more interesting. So by monthly cohort, in other words, what month do they start in, how many and what percentage of the subscribers are currently subscribed? So again, this is a subscriber level. So we're selecting from the subscriber summary. And I don't know if my mouse will show up here. That might help a little bit. Where they are actually a real subscriber, in other words, they paid us some money. And we're going to group by the cohort year, month. And simply counting the number of records is going to give us the number of starts in that cohort. And then summing up the is subscribed flag, which is a logical, change it to an int so we can sum it, gives us the number of people that are still subscribed, and then ratioing that out and multiplying by 100% gives us a percent subscribed. So a little bit more complicated question, but it's basically doing the math. It's not doing any logic here. It's totally weird. Another question, by cancel reason, what percentage of the first chain cancel resubscribes? I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. What percent of the first chain cancels resubscribe, and what is the average lag? And taking everybody from 2014 onwards. So this is looking at the second level of abstraction. This is looking at the chains, right? And the where is starting. We're only going to look at the chain sequence number of 1, so the initial chain. We want the chain to be not active. In other words, they canceled. And we want the starting date to be 2014 and onwards. And then we're going to group by the ending cancel reason. So we've recorded in each chain that it's been canceled, the cancel reason. And we're going to count number of records. That's the number of people that canceled with that cancel reason. We're going to count, this is a little tricky sequel. We're going to count the days until next start as the number of resubs. So if somebody hasn't started a second chain, they didn't reactivate, right? And so you're counting the nulls, you don't count nulls. Ratioing it out like we did before, and then the bottom one is averaging that out. So the average number of days before they resubscribe. Questions? One last example. What are the top 5 content areas viewed over the last 90 days? So this is down at the bottom level of abstraction, and pretty straightforward. The only tricky bit is the where clause is looking at starts that content uses and starts within the last 90 days. And we're just grouping by the top area of usage and then just counting that out. So hopefully I've made the argument that in order to understand customers, given the world we live in, data and no mind readers, we can free the data analysts to do the hard, interesting things and let the business analysts use simplified data structures to get their answers and better communicate with the customers. So we actually did this at Minted. We had the finance people writing queries, we had marketing people writing queries, we even had product people writing queries against this really simple structure. We had, 3 tables. And it worked, everybody understood it. We also did it at lynda.com, where we had a couple of business people. And one of our VC guys was in there munging data and going through and getting things. A byproduct of all this, which Alan and I really like, is this gives, when we put on our data science hats, our modeling hats, now we got data sets that we can go in and really pull stuff out of that we have confidence in and are going to sync up with what the rest of the business is seeing. Time for questions. Thank you. We got 4 minutes, all right? 5 minutes. Yeah.
One of your example questions was like, how many people are current subscribers today? What if my question was like, how many people were subscribers like 2 months ago?
Or why don't you just do the inventory problem? Why don't you just tell me the number of subscribers by month over the last, 3 years?
How do you balance like current state data versus like historical time series?
Oh, so then you need to go down to the second level of abstraction, the stint level, and you need to pick your interval, like the end of each month or beginning of each month or each day, and then see and count the stints that encompass that.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit messier query, but it's not terribly awful.
Thank you.
Inventory problems are really good. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
For a big enterprise, do you recommend painting the structure specific to a function? Because I'm pretty sure at a big enterprise finance might look at stuff differently from finance sales. So my experience is going to be.
Yeah, so the question is, what about a big enterprise that has a whole lot of different interests and functions? Well, I purposely scoped this to be customer insight specific, right? So I would suggest that any size organization, if they're customer focused, all the different groups within that organization, whatever their duties are, marketing, fulfillment, operational systems, if they have the customer focused message, they're going to have to learn about their customers. And hopefully this gives them some information. But we might have to expand it out. If some group needs to have other kind of details at some level of abstraction. Does that make sense? Any questions? Great, thank you.